automation doesn't solve all problems. It really needs to be thought through to see, is this going to actually improve? It's just not some shiny new object that sounds cool.
Right.
It has to integrate with your company. It has to scale up with it. It needs to be one kind of cohesive system.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast today. My name is Marissa Dierlam, Head of Marketing for TGW North America. And today I brought in two of my colleagues from North America, Blake Neal and Dexter Weber. Thanks for joining. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves a little bit?
Yeah, sure. You said my name is Blake Neal. I'm Director of Business Development. I had fashion, apparel, medical, device, and automotive.
I'm Dexter Weber, Business Development Manager here. I work more in our industrial and consumer goods category.
Very nice. Well, the reason I dragged you guys both here is because you recently did a presentation at an event that I thought could be really interesting for our listeners. So often at TGW, we think about, just what's inside the four walls because that's where most of our work lies. But I think you did a really interesting presentation where you talked about the interplay between what you do in a warehouse and also the network design and how a choice you make in network design can impact what you need to do in the building. And the choice that you make inside the building can have an impact on network design. So I thought that'd be interesting to get into with both of you guys. So to start, let's talk about network design. When our customers are thinking about what model they want to use or where they need to put certain buildings, what are some of the main factors that come into play? I would assume cost efficiency and SLAs are top of mind. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I think SLAs drive it. So your service level agreements with your customers is going to be like a key driver on how you set up your network. So it's not just like how quickly they need it, but where are your customers living? Where are they receiving their goods? So is it regional? Is it they're across the entire U.S.? Is it a global thing? So that's a big driver to it. And then of course it's the cost of goods. So also maybe the type of goods you're handling. So is it something that's perishable like fruits, vegetables, whatever? You're going to need to be closer to where it needs to go, or is it something like clothing or a fashion piece that can go over longer distance easier. And then when you think about the shipping costs of those goods too, right? So you're handling something big and bulky. It might not make sense to ship from, Seattle all the way to Miami, right? For a cost perspective.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big driver into it as well. So when you think of overall costs, like what are the costs of storage? What are the costs of transporting the goods? And just how do those relate to the customer as well?
I was going to say the other piece too to kind of take into consideration too is the cost of land. Like if you're going to be putting a big building, is there one place that's cheaper than the other, or the cost of the labor to fulfill those orders? So those are some of the other things too I think we've talked to customers about that make a big difference.
Yeah, and I imagine too that there's an aspect to it, like the sourcing aspect or maybe even transportation methods. You talked a little bit about the distance. Maybe the transportation methods play a factor too?
I think it does, but one thing to think about too is almost everything now is coming from overseas for the most part. So long as you have a major highway that's around where your distribution center is, you should be fine. I think it's something to think about when you look at your overall model, but you're shipping it from a port anyway. Sure. And do you want to be close to a port, which typically is probably going to be higher costs, or do you want to be middle of America where land's cheap, labor's probably a little bit cheaper, it's going to be shipped no matter what. But
yeah, and I think it depends on the type of goods too. Like certain things might be more friendly with air freight versus others. And then sea getting over, or are you having like local production or regionalized production? Are you just coming over the border from like Canada or Mexico? Are you producing here in the US? So when you think about the bigger piece of transportation, it depends like where are you sourcing your goods? Do you have like a single source strategy, a multi-source strategy for some of those things? So I think that plays a big role into it as well.
And I would assume there's a little bit of future planning or scenario planning in it too. Like you have to think about what risks are you taking on if I pick this particular location, whether it's, weather related or something else. Maybe you have to think about the future growth of the business, or maybe there's upcoming mergers and acquisitions, like all those sort of things that you have to kind of potentially play out. And I think with each of those possibilities, either your network has to be flexible and resilient, adapt, or you have to react really quickly and expand it. Does that make sense to you guys too? Is that how you kind of hear about it from customers?
Yes and no. I actually, one thing you said that's kind of resonating right now is like the mergers. There's a lot of that going on, at least in fashion, and it's starting to change how these companies are looking at their network of, okay, it might have been this model versus that. Do we need all that distribution from the original company here? Do we want to consolidate? So that topic's been coming up a lot. And we'll probably get into it later, but I think most of these larger companies have kind of already set up a network strategy. They're 20, 30, 50 years old.
Sure.
And I think now they're starting to look at it and say, okay, we can improve that over the course of a 10, 15-year period, and we could probably get a better ROI or overall our, say, picks per order are cheaper.
Yeah, I would agree. Consolidation is a big topic, and yeah, we can definitely touch more on that later. But risk is definitely another aspect to it, right? So if you're in certain areas and we might have hurricanes or things like that,
sure.
Or we've dealt with a lot of railroad strikes over the last several years. There's a lot of unplanned things and out west wildfires. So when you start thinking about the risk of having maybe one building versus multiple on how to serve customers, that's like a big decision factor as well. Like, where are you going to be located? And then also I think the risk comes not just with environmental disasters or strikes. It's also, where do you have a workforce? And you see certain people moving and shifting from one state to another. So looking at those trends too, like, are you going to have the workforce you need to accomplish your goals? And that's like a risk you need to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So from my knowledge, there's generally two typical models, centralized and hub and spoke. So can you guys tell me a little bit about what each of those looks like and maybe some typical industries that use either of those?
Sure. I guess I'll pick on centralized first. It's, as the name kind of implies, it's a centralized distribution. So you probably have one, maybe two really big distribution centers in your network. It handles everything from inbound, storage, picking, outbound. Everything happens through the one building, and it's really very much a top-down approach. Everything that's happening within that distribution center, you can see. It's easier to forecast too, because you see all the orders going out, when certain stock levels are getting low. But with that, there's also some drawbacks. You were kind of talking about risk. You've put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
If you have one DC and a tornado comes through and you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So there are downsides to it in that aspect, and it's also the capital piece of it. If you stand up a 500, 800,000 square foot facility, that takes some serious capital to get moving. So those are some of the things to kind of look at. And typically with those networks, we'll see a business that has more predictable products. So fashion's a great example.
Okay.
Usually, I'm going to have, say, shirts, pants, jackets, things like that. The size of those pieces. And for the most part, we have a general idea of what their peaks are going to be for the demand. So it's a little easier to say, I need a building that does this. This is how much is going in. This is how much is coming out. Whereas you get into hub and spoke, and it handles, kind of a different market where you're saying it might be more regionalized, where you could have like a grocery store that has very specific food for Colorado might be different than what's in Florida.
Yeah.
And you were kind of touching on perishable items too. Whereas with a centralized model, your customer basis is probably going to be used to, say, a 5 to 7 day standard shipping. Whereas if you're in the grocery world and you have perishable items, you need it there like ASAP. Yeah. So different customers. There's different drawbacks, and I don't think I really touched on it too much with the hub and spoke, but you've got to start up one of those regional spokes, excuse me. It might not cost as much, but you're going to need more of them. So the leadership to run all those different spokes becomes a little more challenging. The communication, understanding if an order is delayed or you don't have enough stock, those are things that you need to know. And that becomes a little more challenging when you might have, say, 20 different regional spokes throughout your network versus that one big centralized building.
Yeah. And you also have to think about like with those spokes where you hold inventory.
Sure.
And like a common case is like, oh, we might have run out of something at this one, so you need to bring it from another one. And how's that shift inventory and how do you communicate that within the network? So I think
it's also a positive thing too, though.
Yeah.
Because if you know that I don't have it over in this fulfillment or spoke, you can bring it to the other one.
You reduce the risk of running out at least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there are like pros and cons along with that. It's more to manage, but you can be a little bit more adaptable or flexible or also towards local markets. And then if you're trying to do like retail or you're selling to professionals like installers or, you know, building like plumbing, those kind of things, you know, if you don't have something in stock, people are going to go to the next place and buy it. So you don't want to risk losing sales. So that's why having those more regional branches to quick fulfill could make a huge difference on your overall sales and customer experience.
And does number of stores play a factor at all? Like I'm trying to think, you know, grocery stores, you might have multiple of them in a big city, but a fashion, maybe you just have it in the one mall in town. Does that play a factor in the network model at all too?
It does, because like the grocery stores, you know, you're going to need daily deliveries. So you're going to want something that's close by to handle that. Whereas fashion or some of the other retail companies that we work with, they might want a big order and it might happen twice a week, once a week, things like that. So you can spread those out and you're not, the logistics behind it becomes a little bit easier. You're not running trucks every day, but not as crazy and chaotic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting thinking about those pros and cons and what our customers have to choose. You know, I can see, we've talked before about like the Amazon effect where there's rising customer expectations. So I could see how a hub and spoke would be really appealing. But like you're saying, there's then a whole lot of complexity that you're adding. And maybe you're losing transparency into your inventory and with, you know, shrinking labor and, you know, less land available and rising costs around both of those, like there's big downsides too. And it's very interesting to kind of think about the pros and cons for both. So in our early conversations with our customers, do you feel like they already have a pretty good grip on their network design and they're just thinking about how to optimize it through their warehouses? I think you kind of touched a little bit early, Blake, about that.
It's going to be rare to find a brand new company that is ready to do automation and really set up a network design
from scratch.
Exactly. So a lot of these are already pre-established companies. And I think they're starting to look at a lot of what you touched on with cost of land, labor, automation is improving. They might be able to get more throughput out of the same footprint. So it might make more sense for them to shift their network design, start to change it. Maybe it's hub and spoke and they think centralized. And we've got some stories of that happening with some of our customers now, but that's a long journey. It's like not something that's going to happen in a year or two. So it's like, say, a 10, 15-year plan of we think we can bring 10 of our DCs into, say, 2. And that saves a ton of money on manpower and just the utilities to run all those different buildings.
Yeah, I would say it's not common for them to say, hey, we're going to shift entirely like our model, but it's, hey, we have this model, maybe it's centralized, but we're growing.
Yeah, incremental optimization.
Yeah, how can we optimize this? Or same with hub and spoke. Like we have a bunch of different, you know, spoke locations. Can we maybe reduce that and still meet those service level agreements? So I think they're looking at technology more to enhance their current setup usually, rather than shifting it entirely. And I think really either way is possible, but it's just more of, you know, how can you best meet the needs of your customers and create that really good customer experience?
So then let's get into that interplay. Just on a very high level, what can warehouse automation do that can impact a network design?
I think the biggest thing is just storage density and throughput within a building. You know, you can get a lot more storage out of, say, an ASRS than you could anything that's manual, just because you don't need the width of the aisles for a forklift or a human. You don't need the mezzanines for an individual to walk up there and grab something. It's also the throughput and the manpower. You can probably save 30 to 40% of your labor by going to automation. And that's a big deal, especially during these peak times. So I think that's how the automation is really changing how they look at distribution and fulfillment.
Yeah. And I think it's really about, you talked about like the Amazon effect a little bit, where people are used to quicker shipping, quicker lead time. So whether it's store replenishment or e-commerce or wholesale, people are looking to have maybe not necessarily, hey, I need every item within 1 or 2 days, but it's how can I have more transparency on my order? And how can I know that I order something and it's shipping quickly? And what can I estimate for time getting to my house? So I think technology like automation kind of help that happen. So, you place an order online, for example, it may be picked and packaged and ready to go within, 10, 15 minutes now with automation. Whereas before, maybe it was like next day shipping and things like that. So as a company, you can maybe even look at a little bit of consolidation. Like I can service a larger area out of each hub or out of my centralized facility and still meet, customer expectations on shipping quicker because, instead of shipping next day, you're shipping same day. So even if you have like one more day of, shipping time to get to a place, the customer experience is the same. But what you've done is you've kind of tightened up your network a little bit with faster, speeds for, picking and throughput. And then I think other aspects are just savings, why customers are investing in this technology. So not just labor savings, but it's really, even from a packaging standpoint, whether you're building a pallet, can I fit more on a pallet with optimized packaging, or e-commerce, how can I have like a right size package and, save that space. So less environmental impact and also less shipping costs, things like that. So there's a lot of optimization that takes place there and still adds into that overall customer experience piece, while also making like a nicer work environment. So when you think about trying to attract or retain labor, there's a lot of turnover. People aren't wanting to push carts around, walking 10 miles a day, picking items anymore. They're looking to have something a little more ergonomic friendly. And that's one role. So when you also think of like the talent piece to it, and how you design your network, you might be able to go into an area now where maybe land's more affordable. And maybe the labor market's not quite as big as another area, but you can still accomplish all of those things through the power of technology.
Yeah, that's interesting. You both have kind of touched on a couple of things that I'm hearing. So denser storage, faster fulfillment, maybe you can spread out your reach of that network. I would think that could maybe lead to the consolidation of your network, that maybe if you are following a hub and spoke, or maybe you're moving towards a centralized, you don't need as many buildings. Do I understand that correctly? Can you give maybe an example of how we've done this for a customer?
There's a couple, but Ralph Lauren's actually a good one. They had 2 distribution centers and they really wanted to consolidate into one. And the ask was, how do we handle that throughput that's happening out of both in one building? And when we started looking at it with them, we could consolidate all that storage. It had the throughput necessary, and that was just half the building. And so then there was a second half that we could add on later on as they grew even more. And that allowed them to shut down that second building, which was a huge savings for them. Each building, like I said, the utilities, the insurance, the manpower, all of it, just to keep one of those buildings running. So that made a big difference for them.
Yeah, and I think that fluctuating order profile. So you had a building for e-commerce and a building for wholesale retail. Certain days you might have more peak on one than the other, and that kind of allowed them to combine and consolidate into one. And then looking at like the home improvement industry, just being able to consolidate maybe regional warehouses that are more for store replenishment, but we've had customers where they have a lot of cash flow tied to very expensive, slow moving goods, which you need to offer in those scenarios. But instead of having at 3-4 warehouses, you have the same expensive, slow moving good. By consolidating, and instead of shipping next day, you're shipping same day. So you can service again more stores within a region out of one location by consolidating these buildings. Store replenishment experience is the exact same. Like they order, they know it's coming next day, 2 days, whatever it is. And their experience is the same, but what they've gained is more efficiency out of one facility. And then they're able to take those like high cost, slow moving goods, and instead of spreading it at 3 warehouses, you just have it at one. And so like by using automation technology, they can be a lot more efficient. That storage density piece allows for consolidation. You keep that customer SLA or store replenishment SLAs in place, and then you're able to perform better, but with fewer warehouse locations. And again, cutting all those duplicate costs. Also the complexity of managing all these regional places. So if you start looking at hub and spoke with technology, now you can do more regional consolidation. which is something we're seeing a lot of across multiple industries right now.
So then on the flip side, we talked a bit now of what warehouse automation can do for network design. On the flip side, well, how can network design impact what we suggest putting inside a building? Like if you have a certain distribution model, does that impact what sort of automation you need?
It's similar in the types of technology you're going to use, but I think how it's implemented. So Centralized is all about speed and efficiency. Like everything's going out of that one building. So you want fast automation, like you were mentioning, like 10, 15 minute times to get an order out. Like that's huge to be able to do something like that. But when you start to get into these regional spokes, you might not be moving as fast and products probably won't stay there very long. Whereas in like a centralized facility, they could stay there longer.
Sure.
You might need more slow moving storage. So obviously those facilities are bigger. In some of these smaller facilities, you can probably see more mobile automation that allows you to reduce your head count, but it's also a little bit slower. So that's kind of what I've seen with some of the regional ones is it's similar technology, but it's just implemented a little differently based on the speed and the amount of storage you need within that building.
Yeah, I would agree to that. And I would say with like hub and spoke, maybe one of the differences, you might have like an East Coast and a West Coast import DC where you're going to be handling maybe more bulk, pallet storage, and then you're going to split up the pallets into more case quantities to send to your different branch locations. So you might look at, depalletizing equipment or transportation for moving pallets around, whether it's like a pallet ASRS system or mobile robotics that are moving bulkier items and trying to break into more case quantities. And then if you move into more of the branch locations, like Blake said, it might be more mobile robotic based. Maybe it could still be shuttle based, but you might be doing a lot more piece picking instead of case picking. So that could be like a difference that you see where the network design is like shaping which technology you're using.
That makes sense. So that's a little bit about like the physical technology. What about digital technologies? I would imagine, especially with hub and spoke, where you've got so many buildings, we talked about the higher complexity and maybe lack of transparency, that digital technologies would especially be important.
Oh, 100%. I there's a ton of different digital technologies out there. And I think they're all important, but for different reasons, depending on the type of network design that you have. Software, like, having a robust WES, it matters for both types, but for different reasons. Like if you think centralized, we're saying it's all about speed and efficiency. You can make very quick decisions because you know exactly what's going on in the building at all times. Like, are your orders getting out? Are you low on stock of certain items? And you flip over to like a hub and spoke, it's about the communication between all the different nodes. I need to know if orders are not getting out properly at one. And like you were saying, you might be able to pull from a different regional spoke. And if I didn't have that insight, we've got a problem.
Yeah.
And it's having that ability to see what's happening in each one of those locations is a game changer. And it also helps too, especially in like the fashion industry, is if you have a bunch of regional spokes, you get to the end of your peak season or a certain season, like say winter, fall, whatever, you don't want to have a lot of product left over.
Right.
So if you're ordering a ton for one and you're low on another spoke, you could potentially move it between them, like say cross stock. If you didn't have that insight at the end of that season, you're going to have a ton of leftover product.
It's just sitting around.
Exactly. And that's just wasted revenue. You have to sell it at a very low margin or just get rid of it entirely. So the software piece is a big deal. Another piece that we've been seeing that's helpful is like sensor technology. So on a centralized facility, if one of your conveyors goes down for whatever reason, like that's a big deal, especially during that peak season. So if you can monitor what's happening on that conveyor or a shuttle or whatever it might be, if there's say an added vibration, maybe it's time to take a look at that before it becomes like a catastrophic failure. So those are, there's a lot more software and technology you can use, but I think we could spend an entire podcast just talking about that. So yeah, it does play a huge role in the different models. And I think all of them are important, but for different reasons for each one.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think our customers are going to keep having these conversations and keep thinking about the interplay. I know we see stats all the time about the growing interest and growing demand for warehouse automation. I saw one recently from Markets and Markets predicting a growth in market size for automated material handling equipment from $33.4 billion this year to $51.2 billion in 2030, only 5 years. So how do our customers then choose what to do? Because like we've been saying, there's things you can do in your network design to kind of tweak things that impacts what you need to do in a building. There's tweaks you can make in a building to impact your network design. Where do our customers even begin to think about these things?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a multifaceted approach. So, they may be looking at ways to better improve their data and their transparency around it to help them make more informed decisions. So there's companies doing a lot of investments in different types of AI to support those things. But I think when it comes to automation, that's where it's nice to have a systems integrator or maybe a consultant kind of help them understand, okay, here are the technologies that could make changes to your current setup. Here's the things you need to consider. You might need to do reviews on like, okay, where are your customers buying goods? Is it shifting more towards one region? Is it spreading out more? Are you growing? How quickly are you growing? How important is scalability? So there's a lot of questions to ask in there, but working with a systems integrator like TGW, that's kind of what we can help do is understand not just how to automate your warehouse, but hey, let's take a look at your network design and where can we look at making those improvements, and maybe where can we look at doing that regional consolidation? What can you anticipate to get out of it? Could you still meet your SLAs? What kind of requirements would you have? So I think a beginning point would be, working with some sort of consultant or, of course, chatting with your system integrators and trying to approach it more holistically, but also thinking of just that end-to-end approach too, because I think a lot of times people are like, I need faster fulfillment, which could be true, but there's also processes for inbound and outbound that can make some significant differences in the labor requirements or how quickly you can get from, receiving to outbound. So like unloading a truck, for example, if you have something, high cube floor loaded cartons, it might take a couple days to unload, meaning you have to have a lot more buffer inventory, for example, whereas automation can help bring that down to hours. So when you think about, cost of holding inventory and being able to service customers, it's a much bigger picture than just the fulfillment.
Yeah, it seems like you have to really evaluate where are your actual roadblocks and pain points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something we've also started doing too is typically, like we said, we look within the four walls of a DC, but changing around your network design or how many DCs you might have, say consolidating, there's other aspects that go into that outside of the four walls, especially like logistics, trucking. So we've started to partner with companies that are logistics consultants so that as we start to make some recommendations based on some of the stuff you were saying with the technology and how many touches a product might have through its journey, well, if we consolidated a building, what would that look like logistically? If we moved a DC to a different location, would your trucking go up? Would you still be able to hit those SLAs? So we started looking outside of that, just the DC, to say, all right, how can we improve this holistically for a customer? So we'll start bringing them in, which helps us a lot to talk with those customers and give them the best solution.
Yeah, I like that you guys are touching on this idea of holistic and evaluating all sorts of different viewpoints and challenges and things like that. I could imagine from our customers' perspective, they would really love it if there was just like a drag and drop template. Like, I'm in X industry, I need Y technologies,
Only it was that easy.
and Z network design. But I think the upside or like the potential I see is like, you can make this very strategic and smart and do something that your competition isn't doing and get a competitive edge. And I think, again, that's kind of why, Dex, like you were saying, there's a benefit to having a systems integrator or consultant, someone who else is working alongside you to think about that. Does that make sense to you guys too?
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for these insights. To close things out then, one last question for you both. If our customers are thinking about their network design or maybe what they want inside of a warehouse, what one thing do you really hope they take away from this conversation?
Two things. One, that one size does not fit all. So just because it worked for another fashion company or another medical device company, it might not work for you. Every company is a little different. Their customers are a little different. So take the time to actually do the research, analyze things, work with individuals like ourselves. And also, I've said this before, automation doesn't solve all problems. It really needs to be thought through to see, is this going to actually improve? It's just not some shiny new object that sounds cool.
Right.
It has to integrate with your company. It has to scale up with it. It needs to be one kind of cohesive system from the physical automation to the software to the people running it. So those are all things that need to be considered before you just kind of pull the trigger on something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would also say that you just need to think about how important transparency is and collaboration. So when we work with our partners, like the best outcomes are usually we have a much more detailed understanding of their business, how they're operating, what their goals are, and we can evaluate, a little bit more in depth on building a business case, like cost of labor, all of those kind of things. But basically, the more transparent you are, the better result you can get. The more collaborative you are, the better result you can get. So just be open-minded, because you might have an idea of the way you operate today, but technology could change that. So it's not just taking one process and turning it into an automated process that's basically the same thing. It might be a wider, more different approach to still solve those same challenges, but just in a different mindset or a different way.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, guys. I'm glad I dragged you down here. I'm sure I'll drag you again because I like the conversations that we have on these podcasts. And thank you to our listeners as well. Hopefully it's been interesting to you, and stay tuned for another episode in the future.